Hey there, everyone. I'm happy to have you all back here at X-Raced, where knowledge meets inspiration in the intricate dance of industry evolution. Now, we've all heard the phrase, people are your greatest asset, right? But let's be honest, how many organizations actually know how to grow that asset beyond a motivational poster in the break room? Well, our guest today isn't just talking about developing people. He spent over 4 decades actually doing it. He's helped a lot of organizations across industries achieve what most only dream about: sustainability, integrity, and long term excellence through competence. He's the kind of leader who set the standard. He teaches others how to meet it, live it, and evolve with it. He's also the managing director and CEO of ACI Global and e-Quip, an ISO certified international educational provider and a pioneer in continuous professional development and accelerating continuous improvement. He's one of X-Ray's most respected regulars. Here's Ian Erskine. Hi, Ian. Glad to have you back.
And lovely to be back again with yourself and also all our viewers. And yes, thanks for the introduction. And yes, today's episode is going to be very special because we take what we learnt last week, looking at the
Mm-hmm.
gaps, and as we determined last week, was that whilst we're looking for the gaps, ACI Global has a very special process where in that process we can take people through, and actually we find there's a lot of times that they don't have gaps. A lot of times there's competencies which they had not even thought about,
Mm-hmm.
and we can take that through into their journey within a given organisation and move them up the ladder in their career a lot faster than if they just go through the traditional gap seeking processes and the traditional courses where a lot of the times we find that they don't
Mm-hmm.
actually need to do that. And to give you an example of that, quite often it comes up. It's quite amazing how many people have actually been in the hotel industry, serving behind bars and things like that. And they'll come to us and they want to do a professional development training course or something like that, a lead auditors course. And, the first couple of questions I asked them, what is your understanding of quality?
Mm-hmm.
And immediately it brings them out. Oh, we've got to have the temperate right. We've got to have the glasses spotless. We've got to have this all done in place before we
Mm-hmm.
even pour the beer. And I say to them, well, there you go. You've got a basic understanding of quality. So you don't have to go through that process of getting them, how much do you understand quality? Because obviously they do understand quality. And this is a very important part of when we're looking for gaps or looking for a fast track process where you can bring a person through that initial competency, inboarding and induction process a lot quicker than possibly you may well have thought at the beginning of the process. And that's what we learned last week. So this week, we're actually going to take the competencies and use that in a collective form within teams and working together to
Mm-hmm.
move forward for the collective benefit of their organisations or their sponsoring organisations, as we call.
Yes, and thanks for that recap, Ian. And I remember we explored the fundamentals of competence, how it operates at the organizational team and individual levels. But today, as you said, we're moving on from assessment to action. I assume this is going to be all about turning competence gaps into genuine growth, how organizations can take that next step to develop their people in a sustainable, structured, and strategic way. So, picking up from where we left off, Ian, once an organization has identified its competence gaps, what are the smartest first steps to turning those gaps into meaningful people development opportunities to every level, both organizational, team, and individual?
So this is where we go back to their initial profile, where we look at their SWOT analysis, their personal SWOT analysis, where we look at their strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Yeah. So what we do there is we identify their strengths, but above all, what we do, we look at their weaknesses and we actually work on their weaknesses a lot more than we do with their strengths because majority of the time, you're putting people into a team environment. Now, within a team environment, it is absolutely critical to understand their strengths, yes, because that's what actually drives the machine, right, or the boat. Let's look at a rowboat, right? But the most important thing is to understand each person's weaknesses and be able to have that understood by each team member, right? So in actual fact, what you're actually setting yourself up for with our ISO skills assessment processes, you're looking at each of their tasks that they do per day,
Mm-hmm.
and you're concentrating to improve where that slight or sometimes major weakness can be. Because above all, we're looking at a team environment, and as a rowboat, for instance, everyone has to be rowing at the same speed, same strength, same passion, same desire to get to the end of the line as quickly as they possibly can.
Mm-hmm.
And to do that, that's what we do. We look at their individual SWOT analysis, right? And then as we map their competencies over a given period of 6 to 12 months and then through to every 3 years, as we look at their capability, we concentrate with our ISO skills assessment and looking at each of those tasks and reviewing them on an ongoing basis so that at all times they are striving to do better, striving, and that's how you get high achievers
Mm-hmm.
within your team environment. And that is critical for every business for it to gain traction.
Yes.
You can't have any weak links within your team, because if you have weak links, that's where you've got to stop, go back, do your SWOT analysis again, find out, well, we missed that weakness,
Yeah.
strengthen that weakness up, and then you will close that gap off so that everyone's rowing at the same space, same speed.
Yeah. It's a domino effect if there's something wrong. And that's such a powerful reminder, Ian. Development is about unleashing their potential. And when done right, it becomes less of a checkbox and more of a competitive advantage till they become high achievers, as you said. And while upskilling is clearly vital, not all development is created equal. How can companies align individual personal growth goals with the broader competence needs of the organization so it's not just about training, but real engagement and cultural traction?
Well, this is where you've got to ensure that when a person leaves home, leaves their family environment to come to work, it's almost like their second family. They have to feel that they're part of that organisation, they're part of the family, so to speak. And they've got to, when they walk in that door, or even when they leave home, they've got to understand their core responsibility. And we talk about primary duty of care. And it starts from the very beginning when they get up, have their breakfast, get in their motor cars. They've got to be absolutely fit for work. So if they're not well, they have to understand, pick up the phone and let people know that I can't come in today, something's happened. And the knowledge is that if you have that passion and belief and understanding with everyone within the organisation, you don't think second about doing that. So you pick up the phone and say, no, I'm perfectly fine. I'll be in a few minutes late, but I'll be there and as soon as I can. And that's the object of this exercise. So they come to work enthused, right? They know their daily tasks. They know that on an ongoing basis, their
Yeah.
senior manager or even the managing director maybe will be wanting to look at one of their tasks on an ongoing basis, right? And the object of this is that you're always trying to improve yourself within that business environment.
Mm-hmm.
But on top of that, what we want to impress upon everyone is they come to work and they treat that business as if it is their own.
Yeah.
So that's where your primary duty of care comes in. They understand that the owner of the business has his primary duty of care to ensure that he keeps the business going superbly so that people can go home and put food on the table. But the idea here is if everyone treats it as if it's their own business, they will put that passion, that desire, and that ultimately is where the organisation must be able to demonstrate their mission and their vision marries up with each one of their people within the organisation. And that's where I still get this today, where some auditors and some business leaders don't put enough importance of understanding the context of an organisation, the internal and external issues, the
Mm-hmm.
interested parties. And quite often when I ask an organisation, okay, give us some idea of who your interested party is, they rattle a whole heap off. And then I say, well, you've forgotten the most important interested party.
Uh-huh.
Oh, who would that be? Oh, yes, our employees. And I often say, yes, quite often you put that down towards the end, but right up the top, the
Uh-huh.
most important interested party of a business is its employees. So they have to have that joint passion, if you like, that
Yeah.
passion. The moment they walk in that door, they are driving that boat as hard as all the other rowers
Mm-hmm.
and to achieve and increase that traction of that business for it to do well.
Yeah.
That's the most important thing that we try to drive within all our training and our team leadership training and things like that.
And who wouldn't like that? I believe that when people see their personal aspirations reflected in the company's direction, that's when the magic actually happens. Engagement skyrockets because people feel like they belong to something bigger than a job description. And that brings us to structure, Ian, because as inspiring as development sounds, it still needs bones. So, what does a well structured competence management and development program actually look like in practice, especially one built on capability, merit, and continuous improvement?
Yes, and merit and meritocracy is the biggest thing that we look for and encourage. And again, going back, and the most important thing is you've got to encourage that leadership and mentoring processes of the senior management and the senior people within the organisation. So this is where you get one-on-one driving together, so to speak, and the one-on-one process where they look back and say, and they sit down, and when they do their
Mm-hmm.
appraisal meetings, it's a two-way street. The appraiser is just not looking at the senior manager looking at Joe's or Jill's performance. The
Mm-hmm.
senior manager is sitting down and say, okay, this is a two-way street. We'll each ask each other questions about how we're performing,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's interesting when we talk about this. I guess in some respects, myself, I led this in the LPG and natural gas markets when I was working with Gas and AGL, where we had a private company come and actually sit down with us, and they started to talk about one-on-one appraisals, and it was always just one person talking to the other person, appraising them, and that's all they did. And anyway, it just went round the room, and I just put my hand up and I said, look, I manage the Dubbo depot, and the way I run my appraisals is I sit down together with the employee, and it's a two-way street. I asked them, do you have any issues with me?
Yeah.
And there have been situations where the employees come back to me and said, yes, Ian, we understand that it's been a very couple of really difficult weeks. Sometimes you're appearing a little bit short with us, all right?
Mm-hmm.
And you take that on board and you work on that of your own personal profile,
Yeah.
right? And I've also had a situation where I've sat down with some of my senior managers
Mm-hmm.
where they were very much autocratic style, right? And
Yeah.
they tended not to listen. They had their own fixed idea where everything was going. And yes, I used to lock horns with people because,
Mm-hmm.
and quite often with senior managers, I used to say, well, you're asking me a question of how I feel, but you've got a fixed idea what you think I should be telling you.
Mm-hmm.
But if you had like a blank canvas and you asked that question, you're going to get a different answer, right? And it makes you stop and think. And that's what I like to think. I have that ability when I sit down and interview people. I try to as much as possible, and sometimes it's quite difficult, I might add, right?
Uh-huh.
But you have to go in asking that question as if you honestly don't understand what that person's going to tell you.
Uh-huh.
Because over my career history of many, many years, I've found that listening to people, there is so much you can learn from the most unlikely people in different situations that you could ever imagine.
Mm-hmm.
So, where I'm leading to here is that we have to have an organisation where there's a team environment, equal passions, the same mission, the same vision, but there has to be this ability where the senior level of management are bringing the others along with them,
Mm-hmm.
and even to the point where they have to be prepared. Wow, I think Miles is actually going to run faster than myself. Maybe Miles may even leap from where I am and may even take a more senior position. You, as a manager, have to be prepared to say, well, good on her. She deserves that chance. Go get it. And I've actually been in a position where people have achieved that
Uh-huh.
within the organisations I've managed. And I
Mm-hmm.
still have them as very dear friends, and they'll often will sit down and talk about that that chance I gave them to
Mm-hmm.
run faster than myself. And I said, well, that's what all this is about.
Yeah.
This is how people improve themselves.
Mhm. And because people have unique perspectives and point of view, so that two-way exchange or process would be really helpful to all parties. And structuring with the soul, it's easy to build a system, but creating one that breathes and evolves with your people, that's where true leadership shows up. But how about execution, Ian? I mean, roles and responsibilities are key. How should leaders approach assigning accountability to ensure the goals of both the individual and the organization are achieved and sustained through the program?
Okay, so this leads on to the first program that we have in place, where we take people through the onboarding and the induction process to the point where they are deemed competent and capable within a role. So we have that competency framework and program on our website, and we'll put a
Mhm.
link at the bottom of the briefing notes for people that can view
Mhm.
that again after this comes to air. But the second and the most important one is the ongoing training and professional development of a
Okay.
person. And we take people over a 3-year period, and we call it our ISO recertification program. And every 3 years, we do a full reassessment.
Mhm.
And it's literally built on the International Accreditation Forum's observation training program, where a senior manager or a senior person within that field sits down with them or goes with them to do a task and observes them for however long that task takes, right? And then feeds that information back to the candidate, right? And basically, once that's achieved, basically then they are reissued with a 3-year CPD agreement and an ISO certification card, and they go for another 3 years with
Mhm.
annual reviews. Now, this is where it becomes quite exciting because we've partnered with Peter Berry and the Hogan Leadership Profile,
Mhm.
where we actually get the person to actually be reviewed and assessed by, could be the organisation's suppliers, one of their suppliers,
Yeah.
and we look at a maximum of 4 to 5 people feeding into that profile of each person.
Mhm.
And those 4 or 5 people that are feeding in have a different range of ideas, skills, strengths, weaknesses, aspirations. And it's quite amazing as we go from 3 years to 6 years and on. And
Mhm.
we've got people that have been with us now for nearly 16, 18, 20 years. And every 3 years, they say to me after the verification process is finished, they say, it's something again, I've learnt something more, and that's something I can take for the next 3 years and build on that within their careers. And it's quite interesting to note that a lot of people that have been with me for many, many years have probably changed jobs, 4 or 5 times.
Yeah.
And it's quite amazing. And a lot of them are now running their own businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And they look back on how we looked at that initial gap or looked at that recognition of prior learning. And quite often they'll say, you looked at that prior learning, Mr. Erskine, and you gave me a chance. Fast forward through a course where I was able to achieve that competency and that qualification a lot quicker than all the other people or training providers I went to. And but this is the name of the game, because you have to be seen by future leaders as being able to give them that leg up if they need it,
Yeah.
right? And you also have to be seen if the hard decision has to be made. Look, there's
Mm-hmm.
a problem with your communication. You have to stop and think about how you ask those questions, right? And it could even be your inability to literally see an issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
Quite often I see people will walk past something that they should have stopped. Wow, that's an accident waiting to happen. Say something. Just don't continue to walk on by.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And this is where true leaders are born.
I agree.
Okay. And that's where we put the 3 and 6 year program together as a competency program for each employee
Mm-hmm.
within the organisation. And above all, it has to match the organisation's mission, vision, their passion, right?
Yeah.
And once you do that, you then truly have a competency platform to start with and ongoing that matches the ISO 10015 2019 competence standard for people development, because this is what we're talking about today, which is the key, which is people development.
Yeah.
Because if we can't continue to develop our people, which are our most important asset, sooner or later the business will start to suffer.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I see this happening when I go into an organisation. Circumstances may have changed. One of the first questions I ask is, what is your employee churn been like over the last 12 to 18, 2 years? Oh, we're now starting to get a lot of employee churn. So you go through with the leading managers of the business,
Mm-hmm.
and ultimately what you quite often see is they've dropped or put aside that competency framework, that
Mm-hmm.
training framework, right? They've forgotten people are your most important asset. If you don't have them rowing in unison together, you won't get that traction. You won't be able to achieve your mission, regardless of what your vision is. Your mission has to be driven and
Uh-huh.
supplemented by those competency programs.
Yeah. And we'll surely drop some links below for our audience to dig deeper into our topic, Ian. And of course, as you said, ongoing training and professional development are highly essential. Aside from KPIs, accountability, it's about clarity, trust, and showing people that their contributions matter, the value that they add to the organization. That's why they're very important. It fuels meritocracy over mediocrity, I would say. And
Yes, yes, and that's very important, because everything that we strive for is meritocracy.
uh-huh.
And what we're going to finish, we'll finish this series off next week, where we demonstrate to everyone the additional benefits coming with ACI Global, which
Mm-hmm.
we can provide the organisation.
Yeah.
And we have something like half a dozen or more programs that fit in and work within an organisation's framework to assist the competency platforms which we've talked about in the first 2 episodes.
Right. And finally, before I let you go, no program is complete without measuring its impact. What are the most effective ways, Ian, to evaluate whether competence development efforts are truly moving the needle, whether that's in numbers, behavior, or maybe long term capability?
That's done now in a very simple way with our ISO skills assessment process. As
Mhm.
I said, we insist on looking at a person's job, breaking that position or that job down into the separate tasks they do,
Uh-huh.
right? And I use as an example a barista. Okay. Now,
Okay.
one of the most important things that a barista does is ensure that everything is clean, everything is ready to go from the time he starts to mix his beans, right,
Mhm.
and then boil the milk and things like that. There's a number of key steps which are put in place that we have to ensure that every one of those tasks is undertaken and achieved to the top of their person's capability. Okay,
Yes.
so that's the most important thing. You have a skills assessment process in place. Okay,
Mhm.
and that's one of the tools that we actually provide people is, and we call it their skills toolbox. Right,
Mhm.
their toolbox is being built up and up and up all the time because as people go from different roles to different roles, they end up with different tasks, different skills, different competencies, right? So with the ISO e-Quip software, that's why we
Mhm.
built into that the toolbox where all these are stored for them. So if the person does ultimately want to leave the organisation and either go to another one or start up their own business, when they leave, they actually take that toolbox with them because that's their own demonstration and verification of their competency, their capability, but above all, their meritocracy, because they can take that to another organisation and say, this is what I bring to your organisation. These are the skills, these are the demonstration that can show you how they've been verified, right? And as we said before, one of the most important things when you put together a CV or a resume, you've got to be able to demonstrate to that business that you're wanting to join, you can add value. So that's one of the most important things they take. They take their skills toolbox with them.
Yes. So skills assessment test and the toolbox. And when you see real
Yes.
transformation in their behavior, I mean the quality of their work, the value they deliver, you know your development program is working with purpose.
Yes, and we liken it a bit to the carpenter's toolkit, where he walks around on his belt with his hammer, his chisel, his nail punch, and so forth. What we
Uh-huh.
liken it to is this is their human intelligence in a
Mhm.
toolbox.
Yeah.
And this is why I am so adamant and still so adamant that we're not going to go and we will refuse
Uh,
to allow AI, automated decision making, and machine learning to take over the workforce because it is so wrong. We value human intelligence, hence our ISO skills assessment, our skills toolbox,
uh-huh.
which people take wherever they go.
Mhm. Well, this chat has been such a great reminder that people development is the backbone of sustainable success, Ian. From identifying gaps to building culture, it all comes back to one essential principle. Again, your people drive your performance. I got that, right?
Exactly. Yes.
And Ian, as always, your insights are more than just valuable, they're deeply actionable. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom once again with our audience.
Absolute pleasure, and I look forward to next week's episode where we'll let people give people an idea of the resources that we can give them, no charge. They
Mhm.
come with our ISO Eclipse software, and so I'm really looking forward to the final one of this series.
Yes, me as well. I'm excited. So, for those of you watching or listening who want to take your organization's competence strategy to the next level, Ian and his team at ACI Global have been doing this for decades. And they've got the credentials, the framework, and the real world results to prove it. So, check out aciglobal.com.au now. And we'll be dropping some links for you to check out. And that's a wrap for today's episode. Big thanks to Ian Erskine for raising the bar as always once again. And of course, to you, our viewers and listeners, for tuning in. Until our next episode, this has been your host, Miles. Stay focused and inspired with X Raced.